What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Shouse in the House. And I'm incredibly fortunate to have our own Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, our own number one patriot of January 6th with me, the Lectern leader, essentially. The Lectern guy is what we'll say. What he's known for, it shouldn't be what he's known for. I have more good stuff that we're going to discover about him today. But that is what has made him famous. So I will allow you to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about, you're a Florida man. You literally are the personification of Florida man at this point. So how did you, I'm just going to start with the general question that everyone talks about. What made you, because the January 6th protest was your first protest. What made you decide to go to Washington, D.C.?
Oh, man, that's a big question. I think everything for me, I didn't really follow politics when I was younger, in my early 20s, mid 20s, even late 20s. And I think somewhere in my mid 30s, I started picking up on it. And I was busy, changing diapers and taking care of kids. So I didn't really have time to be invested. And I always was the kind of person that thought, well, it doesn't really personally affect me, so who cares? It's politics. Everyone hates it.
Right.
Then COVID happened, and COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people. I think it changed a lot of things. My kids were told they couldn't have an education.
Right.
We were told we couldn't go to church. We were told, we had to walk certain directions in grocery stores. I mean, it went crazy. And I think looking at that, it really did wake me up and say, man, this just seems like a lot. And we can talk about, what the mainstream media did with Trump, which seems to be not what they do with anyone else. I mean, there's always some, shit talking back and forth, but
Right.
it kind of got absurd. And I didn't vote for him in 2016 because I thought reality TV star, why that?
Sure.
There's got to be something better. And then there was Hillary, and can't have a
Not
murderer in
something better.
office. Yeah.
I didn't have this question written down, but I do want to ask you, your wife is a doctor.
She is.
So when COVID happened, how did she feel about the response that took place from a medical perspective? Was it did that add, because you have someone in your home that knew the truth from the beginning? So did that kind of amplify how you felt about how the government handled it?
So I know
Is she really the radical in the house? Is that what? No, I'm just kidding.
the day they were going to shut everything down in Florida, I actually went out to Beef O'Brady's with my best friends, and I told the wife, I'm going to the grocery store because we need groceries. We're shutting everything down, and we definitely stopped at the bar first. And so I'm running behind at this point. She calls me and she says, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm at Beef's. I'm getting my last meal before they tell me I can't eat anymore."
Sure.
So she's very upset because the beginning of this, she's a fantastic physician. She is of the mindset, do no harm. She wants to see longitudinal studies. She wants to see, their gold standards they have in practicing medicine. She follows all of them. And when COVID first hit, she was very hesitant she wanted to see what was going to happen, right? Because it's a novel virus. We're not
Yep.
sure what to do. Um,
Absolutely.
Initially it was, well, it's a respiratory infection, so steroids, and we treat it like we always do. And a lot of doctors had these same thoughts. And I can't and I won't speak for her, but I can definitely tell you there was a point where she did start having some more questions about, well, why are we treating things differently now that we've never treated like this in the past? This
Right.
is not something we typically do. We have standards, we follow them. So I think it was probably definitely a lot further into it than I was that she started having some questions. But she's also in charge of, she takes care of old people, and that's kind of who we saw COVID affect the
Sure.
worst. So she was definitely more, I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to wash my hands because I am actually with the people who are at risk.
So let's go back to Gene. I'm sorry, that was totally
Sorry. No,
off
it's good. Yeah.
subject, but I did want to at least ask that. So back to January 6th, you're there, you have compelling reason to be there. You are, for me, by and large, the first major photograph that came out of January 6th. Like everything else feels like just kind of a muddled mess of people, right? You
Hmm.
were just you by yourself with that lectern in your hands. So, number 1, it was by Getty. And a lot of people thought that you were via Getty for a long time, like they thought that's what your name was.
Yeah.
But when that photograph was taken, 2 things strike me in that moment. So, it looked very escorted. It looked like you guys were being walked through the Capitol. Certainly from, like, the Jacob Chansley, is that his name? I might be
Yes.
saying that correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
The shaman.
The
Yeah.
shaman, yeah. Um, just it certainly in his shots that you had photographers all there prepared to take pictures of you guys. And that struck me as odd. Like, why were they all there ready to take photographs of you inside the Capitol? I could understand if they were outside,
Sure.
but they were all inside ready for you. So can you kind of walk me through that process? Like, what did it look like going in? Were you in the front of the pack? Like, how did all that transpire for you?
Well, it was hard for me to know whether if I was like the front or the middle or the back because there were so many people and everything happened very, very quickly. I did see the video of myself afterwards, and it looked like I was probably one of the first, I don't know, 50 inside of the
Okay.
building. We didn't, I didn't see any police officers until like 20 minutes inside the building. I didn't see any armed forces. I didn't see anyone wearing a badge. It was not like that. I saw press, and they were all over the place. They were taking pictures everywhere. You know, looking out through windows in rotundas. They were all over the place, and it didn't strike me in the moment as odd. And I've heard two schools of thought in this, and one is that it is the day they're counting the votes. It's monumental. It's been a lot of you know hoopla about this, and maybe they're just here to take photographs afterwards, get their interviews, things like that. And that's
That makes sense. Okay. Fair.
so I've heard that train of thought, and I've also heard, but man, if the Capitol is under siege and it is this horrible, violent thing,
Why weren't they leaving?
why weren't they leaving? Right? Why
Yeah.
weren't they protected? They were kind of left on their own accord, or where they didn't have any security guards protecting them or ushering them away, which I assume would be protocol. So and again, these are things you can gestate later and figure out like, oh my gosh, like that was kind of weird, wasn't it?
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
been 2.5 years now, and I have more questions, and I was there. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I mean, like, and isn't it interesting? Like, Tucker was starting to release some of this footage. And I mean, I think that personally, the reason that Jacob is out of prison now at this point is because of the footage that was released of him by
I
Tucker.
I definitely think that it had influence. So I know that he was already in. I don't know the exact numbers, but they have two things that shorten the time for people in prison. It was the CARES Act, which Trump put in during COVID, which allowed people to get their sentences reduced by up to 50% if they were nonviolent offenders.
Okay.
So I don't think he had any violent charges. I think they were all just, not even real charges, but they were real charges.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if he was a recipient of the CARES Act. I'd be interested to see that. And there's also, it starts with an F. I can't think of what it's called anymore. Tip my tongue, it's there. But that's the one that's there when you earn credits for good behavior. You have a job, you do what you're supposed to do, you take classes, and they reduce your sentence by a percentage.
Like a
So
deferment program, kind of.
pretty
Okay.
much, yeah. And I know I sat down and did the math on it with my attorneys, and it looks like he was probably in that window to be released to a halfway house. And they were just dumping people out of federal prisons during COVID, which I think
Yeah.
is a good thing. They shouldn't be there in the first place, especially these nonviolent offenders. It's a ridiculous
Sure.
thing we do. But it seems to me, and again, I haven't talked to the guy yet. I assume at some point we will. He was probably in line for the halfway house, but I definitely think it more than likely pushed that paperwork through a lot faster than it may have for some other people.
Right.
So again, it's hard to know which one happened until
Sure.
I hear from the horse's mouth. But again, I I like to know things definitively before I make a
No, no, no.
speculation.
That's
But
fine. That's fair. I just from a strictly like high level observation perspective, it certainly was serendipitous if it didn't have influence that the two coincided very well with one another.
The timing was very, very, very unique. I can
And then
definitely
Tucker
agree with
gets
that.
fired, and magically,
Uh-huh.
we're not getting any more January 6th footage. Isn't that odd? Like, I've
I don't think
it's
it's odd. I don't think it's strange at all.
what? You mean
I
our government would put their thumb on journalists to not share the truth with the American people? Surely not.
Well, there was that one journalist that was covering, Paul Pelosi, right, and let the story released about what was going on, the people there, and then he got put on leave and hasn't been back since. You heard about this?
No.
Oh, you should look into this. There was a journalist that initially covered, Paul Pelosi, very well paid,
His
California.
attack or all of the other shady shit
The
that he does?
the attack, yes,
Okay,
the attack.
gotcha.
But he reported on the story, and he released some things that apparently he wasn't supposed to release or didn't know he was supposed to talk about, and he got put on paid leave. I think he's still on paid leave now.
Wow.
Mhm,
I will say, since you brought it up, not to like completely redirect, but the really interesting thing about the Paul Pelosi attack, I keep going back to this. I have watched that video countless times.
mhm.
I am still trying to figure out who the fuck opened the door when the police knocked on it. I have watched it so many times. There has to be another human being there.
Oh, absolutely, and, I think initially that's what was reported is that there were 2
There
individuals
were
there that.
2 individuals
Mhm.
besides Paul Pelosi.
That may have been the thing that reporter was talking about, but
It
I heard
wasn't even
about
the
this.
reporter. It was in the police report initially.
Well, that's what the reporter was
Yeah,
reporting on because what they had was the early findings of the police report, and it
right.
was it was that, and he like, "Don't say that. We didn't say you could
I
say
didn't
that."
know that he was missing though. That is pretty fascinating.
Well, not missing, just
Well,
on
not
leave
missing,
of.
just on leave. Like
Mhm.
he's not allowed to report right now.
He's not back, but he's, still making good money.
That's crazy. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I know I have a limited amount. I could sit here and talk to you for probably 6 hours at this point, but um so again, I want to go back. You said you were in there for about 20 minutes before you even saw a law enforcement officer.
Yes.
Let's play to the moment where you did finally see law enforcement officers. Were they forceful? Were they, get the fuck out of here? Or were they docile and just like, come on, guys, let's, like, did they treat it like it wasn't a big deal?
The first officers that I saw, we were down by the Senate doors, so it was like down at the very end. I mean, I was in Ashley's group. I found out later, which was the
Oh,
same group that ever. Yeah, it's and I left. I think 6 minutes before she was shot. It's like a ridiculous thing. So, but she was murdered. Sorry.
no,
So
don't say sorry.
we're
She was.
we're by the doors, and from the front, and there's probably about 60, 70 people up there. It's very, very loud. You can rarely make things out. You're having to shout to be heard. And you hear from the front, let him out, let him out. And the crowd just opened up, Moses part in the Red Sea, and just 2 officers came out, and they just kind of sat up, posted up by a corner. And those were the first officers I saw.
Hmm.
And we got tear gassed a little bit after that. And after we got tear gassed, I was like, oh, they probably want me to leave now. So I went and talked to the officers, and I asked them, hey, I'm lost. I don't know how to leave. I've never been in the building before. Is there a way that I can get out of here? And they told me, oh, yeah, just go down to the hallway, take a right, take a right. And then we're escorting people out the other side of the building. I was like, okay, thanks. Stay safe and hope everything turns out okay.
Yeah,
And wished them well and went on my way. And that was the only interaction I had with the police that day.
that's crazy. Okay, so you leave the building.
Hmm.
Where did you go at that point? Because obviously, so in my research that I have done on you as a stalker, and okay, so first of all, real quick, I love the hat and the mug, and I'm gonna comment on that, but not yet. So I
Okay.
just want to tell you that I love them. So according to what I have read, one of your parishioners at your church, Alex, is the one who turned you in.
Yes.
Okay, so You are a God-fearing, church-going man, and there was a comment made. Hold on, I wrote this down too. When the judge was sentencing you, he called you a weak-minded clown, and you looked at him and said that you were pleading guilty because you were guilty. But you were holding public property,
Hmm.
standing on public property.
Hmm.
So were you really guilty? Like, I would argue no, personally.
Yeah.
But
Well, this is DC courts, and there are swords that are required to be fallen upon.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you end up like people like I'm not going to name people because I just feel bad for them, but you will get multiple years. And
Yeah,
I've talked about this several times. You can look if you want to stand up on your podium and your soapbox and say, I'm not going to plead guilty to things I'm not guilty of. Well, good on you, but you're also abandoning your family,
family.
and you
Yep.
do them and you do your movement no good by being in prison.
Yeah.
And you may get accolades and a standing ovation from some people for 2 weeks, but do you know who has to
Then
live
you're
through it?
forgotten.
Not those people,
Yeah.
not those people, your family. So I've been a huge advocate for people taking plea deals. I know you didn't do anything wrong. I know it's public property. I know it was even open that day. The Capitol's only closed 4 days a year. It's closed Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and July 4th, and it's closed on Sundays. But it was open that day. It's a public building. You don't even need tickets to go. You don't need reservations. It's on the website. You did nothing wrong for going into a building that was open to the public. Nothing wrong for showing up to a protest you had every right to be at, and actually every responsibility to be at. So I
Yeah.
don't. I that statement, I'm guilty because I'm guilty, and it's like, well, sure. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you need me to say? And
Yeah.
the things that was coming out of his mouth, he was trying to draw me into some type of
Fight.
embattled
Right.
position to where I'd say
Yeah.
something stupid, to where he could just say, "I don't think you're actually sorry," and add time to it. And
Well,
sorry, I'm going home.
so before I'm gonna get to that, but I want to go back to the Alex thing real fast.
Mhm.
Um, were you guys friends before this? Like, did you even like really talk or know each other?
I would say closer than the periphery. So I volunteered at a church, worked at a church, volunteered. I was very active at a church, and I was helping out with the youth group. The youth bands needed help being put together. I'm a musician. I've always played music. I've always played in church bands, things like that. And she was one of the vocalists that sang. We rotated them out, so I was familiar with her. I knew who she was, and when I have no ill feeling against her. These kids that are growing up, they don't even know what they don't know.
Right.
So there were people that tried to dox her, and I got very involved with that, saying like, "No, leave her alone."
I thought it was a guy, so I apologize,
Well,
Alex, if you ever see this.
it's a girl.
Okay.
It's a girl.
Okay. Um, so first of all, I practice Buddhism, and
Good for you.
one of the things that the Dalai Lama has always, kind of preached is compassion even for your enemy.
Hmm.
And it's always God, it's just super heartwarming to meet someone like you who's been through something so traumatic for yourself, for your family, your kids, your community, like all of that. And you walk away from it saying, like, I bear no ill will towards this person. Like that's a huge that makes you a very big person to be able to do that. So may we all aspire to be someone like you. And I mean that genuinely. I'm not
Hmm.
being like I'm kind of tearing up because I'm a girl and I have a vagina. So,
Well,
um,
I mean, pick your idiom, pick your phrase. I mean, if you go seeking vengeance, dig two graves. If
right,
you're like, if harboring resentment, like it'll kill your soul. I truly do believe that. And look, I can't sit here and blame the government for what they did, because we all know that's who they are.
right,
It's that what's that old story about picking up the snake and putting it in your pocket, and then the
right,
guy being shocked he bit him.
right.
It's like, no, I'm fully aware this is how the government acts. This is how they respond, at least to one, not even political party. I would say towards the people who actually still give a damn about their country. And it's
Yep,
always been against those groups of people. It's
right.
not. specifically conservative or Republican, because conservatives been locking up Black fathers for a very long time,
Sure.
ruining an entire culture. And
Yes.
I can be very middle of the road on so many things. I don't think it's Republican. I don't think it's Democrat. There is a uniparty, and there is the people who actually love their country. And
Yes.
those are the people who are under attack.
Absolutely. And the people who won't toe the line, like
Hmm.
the people who open their mouths, the people who stand against that. Gosh, man, it's so ridiculous. Um so
Sorry, I tangent a lot. I'll try to stay focused.
no, I love that you do. And traditionally I do as well. Um but I just want to make sure I don't miss some of these questions because some listeners have asked me to ask them. So I just want to try to make sure I get them all in.
All
So
right, I'll
you've
focus. I'll
left.
focus. Yeah.
And no, don't, you're good. Don't apologize. Everything's been great. Um, so you have left. You go back home. Did you stay in DC for very long? Like what happened when you left the capital?
Oh, I got the hell out of DC as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Um, so when you told me that I was one of the first people shown in the whole thing, my picture had to have been released within an hour.
It
Like
was.
within 1 hour, the picture had to have gone very viral, because on the walk back from DC, or the capital, to Georgetown, where I was staying, I was being recognized on the street. So it was that quick. And my
Yeah.
phone had died. I'm sure you've heard about my phone had died on the way there. So it's charging my backpack. I don't really know what's going on.
Right.
I'm eating hot dogs walking down the road, like, well, that was something. That sure escalated quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Ron Burgundy sitting there with your beer, like, man.
Oh man. So I'm walking back, I'm getting recognized, and I get back to the room and I turn on CNN, because that's who's going to be saying the worst things about me. Like, I don't
Sure.
turn on Fox, who's going to like whitewash it. And I turn on CNN and I'm like, oh my God. So as it turns out, I may be going to prison for 20 years and someone is dead. Holy cow. So at
Right.
that point, I end up calling up.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of friends who are in law enforcement. So I'm like, hey, what do I do about this? And is this going to be a thing? And they said, well, it's definitely going to be a thing. And they're definitely going to want to ask you questions. And it's definitely going to be, the Fed. So, do with that what you will. But, it's coming around. It's going to be something. So I'm talking to my wife at this point, and she is the appropriate amount of hysterical. And
Right.
I am definitely not in that mood. I'm like, what? I walked into a building and then I
Yeah.
left. That's they'll trespass me. Worst case scenario, they'd be like, hey, you can't come back. It's like, well, it's fine. I got my pictures. I'm done anyway. So
So was she hysterical from a fear perspective, or was she hysterical from like a why the fuck did you go there? Like the typical like wife response. Like I'm curious because one of the questions that I personally had was how did you obviously like sentencing came later, but how did you handle even this initial part? Because I know you've spoken a little bit about how it affected her business. It affected like you lost some friends within your community,
mhm.
that kind of stuff. So how, I want to know like how that affected your home life in that moment. Like it had to have some impact initially.
It did. And the hysterical thing, like it wasn't she wasn't ever mad that I went, because we don't do this thing where I tell you how to live your life. I don't tell you where you can and can't go and what time you got to be
Sure.
home, because we trust each other. I
Right.
think she was upset because I told her, "Hey, I promise I won't get in trouble," and the rest of the story. So she was definitely like, "Hey, you told me you weren't going to do that one thing, and you went and did not just that one thing, but like you did the one thing." you know? But when we got home, I drove through the night. We couldn't leave at night on January 6th because they had the city in lockdown. I was supposed to fly out on Friday, but I rented a car first thing in the morning, and I shaved my beard, like I pull my hair back, I put a hat on, I'm wearing all black. I mean, I'm wearing like two masks, I'm
Right.
trying to get to my car, my rental car.
Incognito trying to get
Uh-huh.
home. Yeah.
And I'm in the rental car agency, and I'm trying to like pick the brains of these guys who are like, who live in DC. Like, man, that was crazy yesterday. What do you so
What are
that
your
was
thoughts on
bad.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I didn't one guy do that thing? Anyway, so I drive home, and we we sit together and we cry the first night together. When I get back, it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning, and we just hold each other because there's nothing else you can do in that moment.
Right.
It's we are either never going to see each other again. My kids are going to be raised by her and her alone and family members, and I'll miss weddings, I'll miss graduations, I'll miss braces, prom, all of this stuff because I
Yeah.
walked into a building. But it took us about 2 or 3 weeks to push through that. And we decided that we have to be stronger than this because we still have to raise our family.
Of
And we're
course.
still married and we're still committed to doing the right thing. And the right thing is not quitting on them, not walking them around morose and torn up and affecting them. So as far as the fallout from everything else in the periphery, it honestly didn't really matter that much because we had each other. We were committed to that. We were committed to our family.
I love that. That's so awesome. Um, okay, so I want to go to the kid part real fast.
Okay.
So you have a couple older boys.
Hmm.
And did they hear about this at school? Like, did they hear, like, dude, your dad was on TV? Like, did any of them experience anything like that to where you had so when you say like you guys were together and you weren't going to be walking around morose, I would imagine. So if it were me, and of course, like I can just say this completely like casually, like I didn't go through fucking hell and back for standing in a public building, but could you like when you could you talk a little bit about how you handled this with your children? Because for me, it would have been almost like a prideful moment. Like you don't want to teach your kids to do bad things, but you want to teach them to stand up for what you believe in. And I can't help but feel like that's exactly what you were doing. So, how did you balance that as a dad?
So I'm very honest with the kids. We don't really sugarcoat things. We don't, give them half truths because they're not ready to hear it because you don't I always
Don't get
assume my
half
kids
truths
know
in the world. Yeah.
I always know that my kids know twice as much as I think they know. So
Sure.
when I
Yeah.
bring them like I think it's time to have the talk, I'm learning things because, they have the internet, 10 years before I had it when I was a kid.
Right.
So when we went to speak with them, it was open, it was honest. We told them, "Hey, listen, we're not sure what's going to happen, but we'll always be a family. We're we're going to be together through all of this, and they're going to come take me. I will be going to jail. I don't know when I'll be coming home. I don't know, what that's going to look like, if I'll be able to call you, talk to you. I don't know. But you have your mom who loves you more than anything in the world. She's always going to be here for you. We had my mom move in, so grandma moved in to also support and take care of them. We had one of the things I talk a lot about. I don't mean to spider people that we had, and I could spend an hour just talking about how amazing these people are. These people showed up. These people stepped up, and the moments I couldn't be here for my family, they were here for my family, and I will never be able to repay them for that. And and there was not a single person who talked to the press that knew me. There was not a single person who did interviews. None of my neighbors, none of my friends. And I think it's a testament to how I live my life. I'm not a bad person. I don't
Right.
do evil things. And if there were those stories, they would be out there.
Yeah,
Someone would have said, "This
absolutely.
is that person."
I dug. There was none. So, no,
I got a couple of speeding tickets, you know?
yeah,
Like, they actually brought that shit up in court. They like no, not in court, sorry, but they did bring up that I smoked pot once when I was a kid. So they
yeah,
had me drug tested. It's like I was 19 years old, and it's legal
yeah,
in half of the states in some way or another. It's legal in DC. This is
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Anyway, but as far as the kids go, we were honest with them. We told them this is probably what's going to happen. There's going to be some fallout, but we will let you know what's going on every step of the way. We went out and I bought the kids like 6 books of stamps. I bought them like 300 envelopes. I got them enough, paper to handwrite or type messages to me. And I told them, you can write me whenever you want. They can't deny mail. So I'll always be here to talk to you.
That's so awesome. Well, it's not awesome. It's so sad, but awesome at the
Yeah.
same time that that's how you were able to handle it with them. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You have this conversation with them. Now the feds show up. What does that look like? Like, what was the initial encounter like?
So I didn't actually have the Fed show up. So for my encounter, it was a Friday when they brought charges. And what they wanted to do was put me in prison on a Friday, so I'd have to wait until Monday
Oh,
to have a hearing. So they threw me
right.
in isolation the whole weekend. Um, no blankets, nothing, just sitting there in the coldest room I've ever been in. I keep my house at 67. This place is meant to torture people. It's cruel and unusual. And they had me in isolation in the psych ward. People were screaming all night long. It was either you were either someone who was shitting themselves, screaming all night, or had COVID. So that's the rooms they put me in.
Wow.
The next day, it was a Saturday morning. They brought in a psychologist or counselor to check my mental status, and I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I really would like a blanket because it's very cold. I'm like, oh, we can't do that because you're suicidal. And I'm like, I have 5 kids and there's a
What?
misdemeanor. I'm facing a misdemeanor. What the hell are you talking about?
So were you facing a misdemeanor at that time, or like were the initial charges a misdemeanor?
We assumed
Trespassing.
we knew that my one of my attorneys worked for the DOJ and the BOP for over 10 years. He's got a storied career. Dan Eckhart, awesome fucking man. Other guy is David Bigney, and these people, they have stood by me thick and thin. They've got their own death threats. They've got people calling for their licenses, but they are good people. They were able to work with the AUSA and DOJ very quickly and say, listen, we're going to be cooperative. This guy is a family dude. He's got 5 kids. He doesn't have a violent career. He's got, a pot charge when he's young. This is not the guy you're looking for.
Right.
He's already told you who he is. He's not running. You've got his address. You got his phone number. I even called him before I left DC saying, hey, I'm not fleeing. I'm going back home. I just, I'm using
Give
my
me a
debit
call
card.
when you want to arrest me.
Yes,
Like,
exactly. Like you don't need to
sure.
kick my door in. Yeah, So we had the charges come in. They were in communication with lawyers, and they said, "Look, you got to do a weekend at the county." So they went and checked me in. Spent the weekend. Monday morning came. They gave me a. I got to meet some U.S. Marshals, and I will tell you, of all of the different 3-letter groups that I met, the U.S. Marshals are the coolest ones.
They seem to be, I'm not joking, they seem to be the only federal agency that has not completely tarnished their reputation at this
Uh
point.
huh. Yep. Yep, absolutely. When I was talking to one of them, and he was the guy who was transporting me up and down the elevator to the courtroom, and he's like, "Man, I gotta tell you, really fucking stupid, but really fucking funny."
Well, I think that's really what everyone was thinking. Like at that moment, we're like, dude, why? That's what my daughter said. My daughter's 11, and she is very excited about this interview. Like she cannot wait to watch it back. And she goes, Mama, you have to ask him, why'd you take the lectern? And I was like, but why not? Like in that moment, you're standing there, you're already gonna get in trouble. Why not do something silly? Like do it for the memes, right? Like,
Well, everything's a prop to me. I mean, I take photos. If you follow me on Twitter, I like taking silly photos. I like using props. I love family pictures. It's what I live for. And
yeah.
before all of this happened, it's still what I was doing. And you can't go back and
Which,
see
by
these
the way, I love
pictures.
your nerdy America with your whole family with your t-shirts and stuff. It's chef's kiss.
Oh, the kids loved it so much too, but they're also the same way. Like they love taking family photos. We went to Universal for New Year's, and we got matching like gold jackets, and the wife got a gold dress, and we were
That's so
walking through
great.
there all looking like matched up and paired. And but this like we are like Americana. That's what we try to be. I
Yeah.
want to raise a family that just loves their country and just wants to have a good time.
Yeah. I love that. It's genuine with you. And I think that's the other thing that's different with a lot of people, especially that have like media personality type situations. I think that it's contrite, it's for the likes, it's whatever, but it's very genuine with you. Like it wasn't ever, I don't think you ever wanted this for yourself if I had to guess.
No,
Um I
there
think
was a
that
statement that they used in court that said, I sent a message saying, I'm finally
I'm famous
famous.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a joke to my friend, that we've been making for like 5 or 6 years
Right.
because I have all of these kids. I'm constantly doing woodworking projects. We're cooking together all the time. He's like, I just can't believe that TLC doesn't have a show of you guys because your
Yep.
life is so fascinating. And I like the inside joke is like, one day I'll finally be famous. It'll happen.
Yeah.
And that's literally what that conversation stemmed from. But all anyone ever knows is that I said I'm finally
Finally
famous, and
famous.
but
Yeah.
that's how they work these cases. You get a single statement, and then you whoever's reading it, whatever side you believe, you build a narrative around it.
Yep. And so, notable point made there real fast.
Hmm.
I think, in the communities certainly that I run around in, shit posters united, right? Like we could have an entire association at this point for the people that I hang around with, and I love them. But it is very important to take note that if the federal government wants to fuck you over, they will find a way to do it.
Hmm.
And they will they will literally climb up your asshole and take pictures. Like it's that bad. They will crawl all over your life to hurt you. And anything that you've ever said, it doesn't even matter if it's under arrest. Anything you've ever said is fair game for them. So,
Yeah, but that's the way they write the federal law, though. The federal law, you either broke the law one way or the other, but you definitely broke the law.
right.
Like that's how the federal law is written. And there are countless stories of people in prison that have been, entrapped by these laws that are written to entrap people because there are quotas. You know, so it's very easy for, okay, if we're talking about a bipartisan issue, I think you could ask, a group of 50 Democrats and a group of 50 Republicans and say, do you think there are quotas for state troopers to write tickets? And everyone would agree.
Yeah,
Yes. I mean, everyone would agree, like, well, yeah, because no one likes getting pulled over and getting a ticket, but
sure.
everyone speeds, right? Why is it so hard to believe then that the FBI has a quota? Why is it
Right.
so hard to believe that any other agency that is trying to become profitable through our tax dollars and always getting that 4.5% increase in their payout every year, why wouldn't they have quotas then? Every
Right.
job has quotas and they set people up. They set people up. It's part of their job.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen that probably more, I would argue, since COVID and January 6th than any other time. And we've noticed it more, I guess,
We're
maybe
more
is
aware. We're more
more aware.
aware.
Yeah. I think it's been going on since the beginning of the institution.
Hmm.
But the idea that even through like I think what was probably one of the most alarming moments for me was the Proud Boys trial where
Was that a trial?
well, okay. Fair point, fair point. But the day that they were getting ready to call a witness to the stand, the defense was getting ready to call a witness to the stand. The night before, the feds had to disclose the fact that that was a CI.
Hmm.
And it was like, you've let us put him on the witness list. We've coached him, we've worked with him. We're getting ready to put him on the stand. And the night before he takes the stand, you tell us that he's an informant for you.
Yes.
And it's like the number of people that were involved in that organization were all feds. Like it's like you guys are the ones committing the crimes and entrapping other
Hmm.
people.
Well, there's
Because
11,000 hours they're refusing to turn over at this
right.
point because, well, maybe we had people there or something,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that's none of your business.
Yeah.
That's none of your business,
Yeah.
because we got to save democracy. And the only way to save democracy is to throw people in prison for walking in a building.
Right.
Like, does that sound believable to you?
No,
This
it's
is,
very banana republic-ish at this
hmm
point. Like we're to the point where you just have states willy-nilly, judiciaries and executives changing state laws for voting and completely circumventing their legislatures at this point.
yep.
You have uh, like the amount of executive orders that have been issued during Joe Biden's administration, the edicts. You want to talk about fucking pissed off? Let's talk about the pistol brace rule. Like what? are you
Mm-hmm.
even talking about? And then you have congressional members up there who don't even know how a firearm fucking works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you put this strap on, it becomes an automatic. What? You still have to pull the trigger the same number of times. Like, I'm
Well,
sorry. I
to
totally
these
digress. I
no, to
apologize.
these people, guns fire all by themselves. That's what happens. It's definitely never, the trannies who wait, can I say trannies on this? I don't know where you
You can
broadcast.
say whatever you want. I have no restrictions on my show at all.
It's definitely not the trannies, who are doped out on testosterone they shouldn't be on, making them aggressive and angry, with an
Right.
absent father. And like it's definitely not that. It's always the guns who always sell fire. Where
Right.
is the manifesto from Tennessee? I am confused.
Isn't that
Maybe
so
we'll find
crazy?
out she has like some gambling debt, she couldn't pay back, and
So can I tell you, I actually have a theory on the shooter in Nashville.
I think we'll have the same one. Go ahead.
So I think because that church, school, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
has a history of child abuse, sexual
Uh-huh.
child abuse that has
Uh-huh.
been covered up
Uh-huh.
numerous times
There you
over
go.
decades.
There you go.
And I'm pretty sure that she was abused there.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we can't let that, because I mean, the same school that she shot up paid
Mm-hmm.
for her funeral.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? There were two factors there. Like, you were probably going to get diddled as a kid. One, it's a school,
Right.
and two, it's a school run by a church. So you have a double chance there.
Yep.
And I mean that as a joke. I mean that as a
Right.
joke. But you're, statistically more likely to be abused at a public school than in a church. But it does happen a lot in both.
Yeah. I was going to say something, but I'm not going
Sorry.
to because I'll get canceled if I say what I was about to say. So,
And look, I mean, maybe, and that's the thing too. I think sometimes that we're just hiring people because they have a degree. Like, so
yep.
as far as churches go, we hire like the same people over and over again, and they're not good people. They just have a piece of paper that says, but I'm going to say all the right words.
Right.
And churches are responsible for not putting together people with degrees, but putting together people that can put people back togetger. Like,
Sure.
we don't
God, that's
actually,
such a great sentence.
we,
I want to like take the time to write it down, but I'm not going to. But I will make you tell it to me again later because that was really good.
I already forgot it. Yeah.
Have you been
So,
smoking weed now, Adam? What's going on?
no, I had a long day. I was in the attic for hours. I lost a lot of water weight up there. And I'm on a whiskey and Coke diet tonight, so we're
Nice. I
pushing
almost
through it.
got wine and then I was like, I don't know if I should do that. Like, because you're so wholesome. Like, I was like, I won't do that tonight. Okay. So
Oh God, I'm wholesome. I gotta do something about my image. I gotta work on it. I'm supposed to be this bad
that's
boy
not gonna
terrorist,
happen.
and
Um, so I know you had already kind of touched on your plea deal,
Mhm.
but do you feel like you were pressured into that where they're like, you better say you're guilty or we're gonna fucking rail you if you go to a jury trial?
Again,
Or was that an advisement from your attorneys? Like, how did that play out?
this goes back to my attorneys, and Dan and David were both very honest up front. Look, here's the thing: if you don't take the plea deal they offer, they will take it before it's called a grand jury, I think, and
Right.
and they're going to
And
bring
you
an
can't
additional
present a defense there.
they're going to bring an additional 5 or 6 charges on top of the 3 they already marked you with. So not only will you go to trial for 3 of them, you will also go to trial for another 4 or 5.
Right.
And then you'll be looking at, and there's a memo that came from, I think it's Eric Holder. I think it was Eric Holder. Yeah, Eric Holder, who said they're supposed to only prosecute the highest one. They're not supposed to stack charges. And this was his memo before he left office. So they use the reasoning that, so what they can do is add, so if the theft charge they're going after for moving furniture isn't enough adequate time to punish you, they'll find something else to get their pound of flesh. So You may think like, well, screw it, I'll go to court. So what if I go to prison for a year? I'm not going to plead guilty. They'll find a charge that will carry 5 to 8 years instead, and they'll
Sure.
charge you with that. So they told me the win right up front is getting the felony dropped, getting a misdemeanor, and they said, look, you will see prison time. Like you
Yeah.
don't, we can get the felony dropped, but you're going to prison. We don't know how long it's going to be. The sentencing guidelines based on your, criminal history and and the charge they may or may not take with one of the other misdemeanors, you're looking at anywhere between 3 months to 6 months. And they were completely right all the way through.
Right.
But when I look, I don't go to a, it's a bad analogy because I do cook. What would I say? Okay. I don't go to a mechanic and tell him, hey, fix my transmission
Right.
when there's like a nail in my tire, but I'm not the mechanic, right? It's like, no, there's a
Sure.
nail in your tire. That's why it's not moving.
Yep.
So I trusted my attorneys to have the advice. They've literally been doing this for, a combined 30 years together. So why wouldn't I listen to them? I'm paying them to give me advice. And look, I went to prison for 75 days. Shouldn't have. I think it's bullshit. I think it's a gross miscarriage of justice. But I didn't go for 2 years. I
Right.
wasn't in a gulag. I didn't go for 5 years. I'm not going for 18 years.
Yeah.
Like I made the right decisions.
So, yes, I don't disagree with you. I think that the unfortunate thing is that they know that too, right? Like
Hmm.
they know that the likelihood of everyone just pleading out and then they all get something, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about inside of the prison. So you were in prison for 75 days. Okay, so
Yes.
outside, if you're a Republican, like the major discussion has been you guys are being like, or you guys were, you personally were, the people who are there still are being completely mistreated. Like it's almost like a gulag. Like you were isolated, you were being treated mentally and emotionally just tortured essentially. Can you uh, for example, I saw there was a story, a woman and her 3 kids were going to see her husband,
Hmm.
and she's, like, 6 states away from DC. So, visitation, like, this was all planned, it was orchestrated through the attorney that they could come up and see their dad. She drove all the way to Washington, DC. The day that she showed up, they canceled the visitation.
Yeah, that
So
happens.
it's that type of stuff that I have seen on my side, but I don't know how much of that is politicized too. So I'm curious, as someone who was in there, what was that part of your experience like?
So, God, there's a lot there. I when I first got to prison, they had me in ISO dorm, so couldn't leave for I think it was like 17 days. I couldn't leave the unit, so kind of locked inside. And best of luck to you. Um, I I try not to make my issues what I went through too much because it pales in comparison to what everyone else is. And the last thing I want to do is woe is me because I know what other people have going through and what they have gone through. So I try to I want to defer almost to, and I want to answer the question, but there were things that happened to me that were certainly unfair and not right. I was forced to take a vaccination or be thrown in solitary for the entire time, and someone was just murdered a couple months before there in solitary. Which how does that happen? Epstein, but like this is wasn't really given a choice.
Yeah.
So there were things that did happen that are absolutely incredibly shameful and messed up. But I'd rather talk about the people that were there longer than I am, people that are still there now, and what they go through, because I was there long enough as basically a tourist. I got to understand what these people are going through. I obviously missed my family and hated every moment away from them. But what I did see happen to a handful of people there, most of the people there, is just pure abuse. They would do things like go through and you get commissary, and they take away your commissary just whenever they want. They can just say, "Oh, you're not going to shop this week for
You're
food."
being bad this week or
Someone
whatever.
smoked a cigarette, or just some COs having a bad day, you know,
Right.
and they'll go through your locker, and if they'll say things like you can only have like 10 packs of tuna fish, but they don't really feed you in prison. They don't feed you in prison. You don't I lost 20 pounds there. And that's with eating commissary. My commissary was packed every week. I was taken care of. I still lost 20 pounds. They don't feed you. They don't feed you. And the food they feed you is so bad, half of the meals you're throwing up 20 minutes later because it's not human grade food. It's actually food not meant for human consumption. It's produce that's meant for horses. This is what they feed you in prison. Um, they shut off phones. They tell you, oh, they're not working today, so people can't call their families. They shut off our phones and emails for almost 2 weeks. My wife had no idea what was going on with me, and I am someone who called her twice a day. I was constantly running out of minutes and couldn't put any more minutes on the phone, by the end of the month, but couldn't email or anything. She called the prison to make sure I was okay. The person who answered the phone said, oh, he probably doesn't want to talk to you. Everyone handles with prison differently. Completely lied to her, saying that nothing's going on here.
Wow.
Nothing's going on here. But we like people couldn't reach out to their kids. And then these people have been in prison for years. They want to call their kid on their birthday because it's literally all they can do is make
Right.
sure on their birthday, I'm going to call and sing happy birthday. And there was God, there are so many stories and it breaks my heart just rehashing them. There was a guy, this is probably 11 o'clock in the morning. Everyone's got a cell phone in prison, but the ones, everyone. I didn't, certainly wouldn't. He's singing happy birthday to his kid on his phone. He's crying through the whole song. And he's never even met this kid. When he went to prison, his wife was pregnant. And he's never even met his child. And he's singing happy birthday through a phone, losing it. And all this guy did was have some drugs. And like not even like drugs to sell, like some personal use drugs. And they have taken his family from him. And we have to be better than this. We have to do better than this.
Yeah.
And I think if anything, I could kvetch, I could say like, woe is me, but I didn't know about any of this until I went, and I counted a blessing that I got to see it because I will never be quiet about the way that we treat American citizens. There is a better way to do this. They don't need prison, they need help. They need
Yeah.
help. And prison is not help. Prison is
Sure.
torture. Sorry.
So, no, no, you're fine. It reminds me of the Stanford prison experiment, except
Yeah.
it's real life, not just an experiment. Like these people who are put in positions of authority and power over completely powerless people, right? Once you're a prisoner, you're completely disenfranchised and you essentially have no rights anymore. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to complain to the
Yeah.
manager? Right? Like, it just doesn't work that way. So,
They
and
steal
then
your
on
food. They'll come through and steal food out of your locker, like your actual food. They will come and say you have one too many tunas, and they'll take that tuna and throw it in the trash. If you so people get shuttled around to prisons all the time. They call it gas therapy. If you're becoming a problem in prison for the COs, you're asking too many questions, you're filing reports because what they're doing is illegal. They have no right to do it. You reach out to
right,
attorneys. They do what's called gas therapy or diesel therapy. They'll put you on a bus and bus you around the US for months. 2 weeks in isolation every time you show up to a new prison because they have to process you. And they'll do this to get you to shut the fuck up. This is what they do to people. So sometimes you'll come back after doing a tour of prisons for 8 months. I learned my lesson. I'm sorry. There was a guy who had Tupperware that he bought from a different prison, right? In which you're allowed to have at that prison. It wasn't on our commissary list. They sent that person to the SHU, which is a special housing unit, which is isolation for 2 weeks because they didn't know that Tupperware came from a different prison. They called it contraband. Like this is the shit they do, and it's every single day. It is every single day. And there is an invoice that sits with R&D when you have intake. It's on that list. All they
right.
have to do is radio into R&D and say, hey, what did this guy come in with? And it's going to be on that list. Oh, we had that Tupperware. He bought it at this place. And they know this. They don't care. They don't care.
Do you see in your future any sort of, just because you've been on the inside of that, and you obviously have strong positions about the number of people that we have in prison for nonviolent crimes? I would say that's a very libertarian position.
Mhm.
I don't disagree with it at all. But my question to you is, do you see you doing some level of advocacy work or public speaking or anything like that with regards to some actual like prison reform? And what does that look like for you? Like how would you fix that situation if it was you?
I think it all comes down to where our money goes. If we have enough money to kill people, countries away from us for wars we have no business being in, we have money to give people the help they need here who are suffering
Right.
with drug addiction, who need help getting vocations. Like, here's the other thing too. You're supposed to get training in prison to do things. Everything shut down. Everything shut down. There's this
Right.
list of things you're supposed to be doing, like, "Ah, well, we don't really have the funding to hire the person to get you certified." You know what you can do, though? You can go work in Unicorn in a sweatshop for 15 cents a day with no AC. OSHA won't even go in those buildings because they know they'll have to shut them down. Like, this is how they
That sounds
treat people.
very Chinese gulag-ish.
It is. That is how prisons work, and I had no idea. And I was of the very conservative mindset, and I will never stop apologizing of it. You end up in prison because you deserve to be there. You did something to be there, so that's why you're there, and that's good luck with all of that. You get what you
So
deserve.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So I was very prior to, I would say probably 2016-ish is where I started like flirting with not being this person anymore. But were you like kind of a back the blue person where you're like, cops are here, they're here to protect us, they're here to do great things? Like I have done a complete 180 on that. Not that I don't love some police. I have friends who are cops. So please don't hate me. But I I am very anti-authority at this point. Like when I watched a mom get dragged down a set of bleachers at a football game and across a track at a football field by
Yep.
her arms, like her feet are dragging behind her
Yep. Over a mask.
because
Yeah.
she didn't have a mask on.
Mhm.
That moment, that very moment for me